So we're going to go ahead and get started with 8.3, which is finding linear factors and zeros. We've done this before. It is super simple. It is not difficult. So we're going to give you different little sections. In the first example, we need to find the polynomial and do the factors. So we're finding factors here. So the biggest question you're going to have to be asking yourself is, what do they have in common? So for example, this is the first problem. X cubed minus 2x squared minus 15x. So when you look at all those three terms, what do they all have in common? An x. So what can you factor out? An x. So we factor out an x. When I take away an x from there,
that makes it x squared.
It makes this x squared. When we take an x from here, this becomes 2x. And when we take this x away, it becomes 15x. So please make sure that you check that when you were, if I were to distribute and go this times this, this times this, this times this, does it give you the top three?
Yes.
If it does, then you did that right. Now look at what's inside of the parentheses. We've done this factoring before. X squared minus 2x minus 15. So this is where I would advise you, hey, you have to make a little table. Okie dokie. So you're supposed to make your table with the last number and the middle number here. We look for factors of 15, which are 1 and 5, 15 and 3 and 5. And because the 15 is negative, we know they should be different signs. We look at the middle one is negative, so that tells you the larger one should be a negative one. And the one that gives you the negative 2 is 3 and 5. So then my factors, we bring down that x. Then we have the x plus 3. And the x minus 5, and of course, once again, we bring that one down. The x plus 3 comes from that 3, and the x minus 5 comes from that 5. Alright, so then that's your answer right there. Now let's try one more on our own. Let's try one more. So let's go ahead and try this one just to make sure. It's a super easy assignment. We're keeping it simple. We're going to not do some stuff. We already know what the test, I already know what the test looks like. So I'm just making sure I cover the points that are going to be in that test. So when we look at this one, once again, what does it have in common?
X.
X. So we look at it, remove an x from x cubed, so we end up with
X squared.
x squared. Remove an x from 7x.
7.
Oh, sorry. This was supposed to be a 7x squared. My bad. I apologize. So then we have a 7x left over, and then this here becomes a 10. So we're looking for the factors of who? 10 and 7. Factors of 10 that add up to 7, 1, 10. 2, 5. Who's going to add up to 7? 2 and 5. So these are the ones I'm using. So then this is x, x plus 2, and x plus 5. So pretty simple?
Yes.
Yes? Now, what happened? Question? Let's say we had x to the 4th plus 3x cubed minus 4x squared. Now, what do all these have in common? X squared. So when we factor out the x squared from the first one, what do we have left over? X squared. When we factor out an x squared from 3x cubed, what do we have left over? 3x. And when we factor out the x squared from here, negative 4. And then we end up with the same type of problem. So negative 4 and a sum of 3. So 1 and 4, 2 and 2, but that's a negative 4. So that means your signs are going to be what? They're going to be different. Anytime this one is negative, your signs are going to be different.
Is the 1 and 4?
So I'm looking for a positive 3, so that means my smallest number has to be negative, so it has to be this guy. It would give me the 3 that I'm looking for. So this becomes x squared, x minus 1, and an x plus 4. So we're just looking for factors, that's it. And there's one more in this section, only because it's more than a variable. Are there any questions? So part D and the last one for example 1, we have y equals negative 2x to the third minus 2x to the second plus 40x. So when we look at this problem, who can we factor out? A 2 and an x, right? Now, but what kind of 2 would you factor out? A negative 2. Because remember, we always want our x squared, or the first one there, to be positive. So we're going to factor out a negative 2x from here. So what would I have left over? X squared. And double check that this times this gives you that, and it does. If I factor out a negative 2x from here, what do I have left over? Plus, right? Because a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and it's a 1x. And if I factor out a negative 2x from here, what do I have left over? Negative 20, and that's it. So please remember that we are basically dividing. 40 divided by a negative 2, negative 20. So now factors of negative 20 that add up to a 1, 120, 210, and 4 and 5. It's a negative, so they have to be different signs. So who's negative, smaller or bigger?
Smaller.
Smaller, because we need a positive answer here. This guy's positive. So which one gives me the positive one?
4 and 5.
Negative 4 and 5. So negative 2x, x minus 4, and x plus 5. So we're going to go ahead and get started with example 2. Here we're finding the zeros of a function. So we've already done find the factors. We did the factors, but a 0, remember, we have to set each parentheses equal to 0. So, for example, they're going to give you something like this. Y equals, and this is super simple, x plus 2, x minus 1, x minus 3. So, what do they give you?
The x's.
They're already giving you the factors. So, how do you find the zeros?
The opposite.
X plus 2 is equal to 0, x minus 1 is equal to 0, x minus 3 is equal to 0, which we've already covered. Yes, it is the opposite. But for those of you who have to see it, minus 2, x is equal to a negative 2. Plus 1, x equals a positive 1. Plus 3, x equals a positive 3. That's how simple it is. It's just basically the opposite of what you have. So in that section, when they're asking you to find the zeros, you have 3 problems like that. That's what you're going to have to do. Now for letter B, they're going to give you x plus 2. So here, what do? This x plus 2, fine, x plus 2 is equal to 0, but how do I write this one? It's just what? X equals 0. And you're done with that one. But you need to make sure you put it, because if you don't, guess what?
Wrong.
It's wrong. And this one is a negative 2. So you just said each factor, each parentheses, equal to 0. We're good? Questions?
No.
So the last example 3, we're going to write the polynomial given the 0. So in this one, they already tell you, hey, x is this, and x is this. But you need to write down the polynomial. But backwards, exactly. So for example A, they're going to tell you, hey, x is 4, negative 2, and 1. So in order to get a positive 4, what did the parentheses have to look like?
X
minus 4. In order for it to be a negative 2, my parentheses should be x plus 2. And in order for it to be a plus 1, it had to be x minus 1. But here, they want you to come up with a polynomial. So guess what you have to do?
Multiply.
Do the whole FOIL thing, multiply. X times x, x squared. X times 2, 2x. Negative 4 times x,
Negative 4x.
negative 4 times 2,
Negative 8.
negative 8 is right. Now, let's combine whatever we can here, but don't forget, you still have this x minus 1 in the back. So what can we combine in here? The x squared stays, but these two become negative 2x minus 8. Don't forget, we still have the x minus 1, so you have to do distributive property. It's not considered FOIL because the first one has 3 terms. So then we do x squared times x, which is x cubed, x squared times a negative 1, negative x squared. Then we're looking at the middle term, negative 2x times x, negative 2x squared, negative 2x times a negative 1, positive 2x because it's a negative times a negative, and then we're going to do the negative 8. Negative 8 times x, negative 8 times a negative 1, positive 8. So, this one, could it be combined with anything? No. So, y equals x cubed. These two become a what?
Negative 3x squared.
Negative 3x squared. These two become a negative 6x. And the 8, we cannot combine it. So, that's it. We're done. One more. One more. So let's look at B really quick. They tell us x is 3, 4, negative 1, and 0. 3, 4, negative 1, and 0. And this is the last one. So what do we have to do?
X equals negative
X minus 3.
And then x minus 4.
X minus 4.
And then
X plus 1.
And x plus 3.
And it's just an x, and we're going to put it up in the front because that's where it looks best. So why this x comes from the 0. Anytime you have a 0, it's just x. Just like in the previous problem, x is equal to 0. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. I would multiply the x at the very end. I would do these two first. X times x, x squared, x times negative 4, negative 4x, negative 3 times x, and negative 3 times a negative 4. Positive 12 is right. Please keep in mind that it really doesn't matter which one you do first. You still do end up with the same answer. It's just, I think at the very end, it's just easier to distribute that x to everything. We combine terms here. It becomes a negative 7x plus 12. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. All right. So then we'll go negative x squared times x, x cubed, negative x squared times 1, 1x squared, negative 7x times x, negative 7x times 1.
That should be negative 7x squared.
Thank you, sorry. And then it becomes a minus 7x, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we have 12 times x,
Positive 12x.
and then 12 times 1.
Positive 12.
So there you go. So we combine whatever we can in there, which is going to be the x cubed stays. These two become a negative 6 x squared. Then we look at these two, which becomes a positive 5x. Is that right? And then plus 12. And the very last step would be I have to do what? Distribute everything to who? To x. So x times x to the third, x to the fourth. X times a negative 6x, negative 6x cubed. X times a 5x, 5x squared. This times this, 12x. And then that's your final answer. And sorry, it's kind of in there in the, that's a 12x. Just make sure you got that. Are we good?